So thank you so much, Nsika, for celebrating diversity and giving me the opportunity to share my story. I would also like to thank all of you. I have felt incredibly embraced this Nsika, and my heart is filled by everyone just sharing the love. So thank you. I would like to start by thanking the Clay Arts Center, Lee Taylor Mickelson, and my Clay Arts Center family, Ohio State University, Steve Thurston, Paul Simon, Jenny Hansen-Gard, Ash Newcomb, Lindsay Sipta, April Philippe, and also Art Access. I want to start by telling you a story of my history, and that history begins with my parents. I am the incredibly proud daughter of 2 immigrants. My parents sacrificed everything to come to this country, their lives, family, comfort, and everything they knew. They came here like so many immigrants do to build a better life. Because of their sacrifices, I have been given opportunities and spared of being exposed to the senseless violence that plagued Medellin, Colombia in the 80s and 90s. I am grateful of where I come from and where I am today because of my parents. Thank you, Mom and Dad. My mother immigrated to Miami, Florida by herself at the age of 16 while she was pregnant with me. This is a portrait of my mother's journey. I wanted to document this event because I feel it is important and stories like hers matter. Coming to America is a celebration of my mother's immigration story and the gratitude and the pride that I feel for her. My father's journey to get to Miami took much longer. He first took a plane to Panama and then another to the Bahamas, where he was stranded for 12 days with no money. Eventually, a boat picked him up and broke down in the middle of the sea for 3 days, and he was lost. 30 Days at Sea also aims to celebrate my father's journey and bravery. My father was rescued and left at Cat's Cay, a residential yacht club. He was left alone for 2 weeks without any food or water, surviving off only coconuts. The owner of the boat eventually returned to reclaim his boat, but the new boat also broke down and the driver had to leave the island once again. My father cried and pleaded with the man not to leave him because he was going to die. The man's response was he had to come back for his boats, and if my father was still alive when he returned, then he would take him to Miami, Florida. My father almost died immigrating to Miami. He knew of the risk of his journey, but he knew he had to take it for his family. Some people don't get to come over under the best circumstances, but that doesn't define them. There's a lot of shame and stigma that comes with immigration, and I hope that my work can help change that. I know that when I ask my parents for these stories, there's a lot of discomfort. I hope that I can help alleviate some of those feelings and show the pride that we should feel for our stories. My mother and I eventually went back home to Medellin, Colombia, 2 months after my birth. Life in the States is hard enough on an immigrant. I can't even imagine how hard it would have been for a new teen mother. This is the city of Medellin, Colombia. It's a beautiful city. It sits in a valley and is surrounded by mountains. I spent the first 4 years of my life here in the mountains living in farms. My family for generations back come from those mountains, and they were all farmers. This is a portrait of the Colombian mountains. The mountains are home for me. They remind me of my family and me. I'm in love with the mountains. When I was 4, I moved back to the States with my mother. We moved to Bristol, Connecticut, a small town in the middle of the state. We would quickly assimilate and become proud blue-collar Americans. My mother became a factory worker. We loved rock and roll. We drove a Firebird, and she even had a mullet. I also learned English in a month, but quickly forgot how to speak Spanish, as we were strongly encouraged to assimilate. I felt to be a proud American meant you had to look. I felt to be a proud American meant you had to forget about your past and look to the future. When I was 11 years old, my mother and I moved back to Miami, Florida. Miami is nicknamed the capital of Latin America, where more than 60% of the population are Latinx. I found myself surrounded by immigrants and children of immigrants, people just like me. One of the best parts about living in a place like Miami is how I learned to be proud of who I was and where I came from. I was also fortunate enough to learn Spanish again. And being close to South America, I was able to spend my summers in Colombia, and I was able to reconnect with my family again, my heritage, and my culture. My work is an illustration of my personal life, and I use myself and my family as a large part of my influence. I work through themes of identity, as this is something that I personally work through in my life. As I look to reconnect with my culture, I use my work to help me in my journey while researching our histories and documenting our stories. I've realized how important this is as I lose family and some of our stories forever. Not only do I make work to preserve my family stories, but to honor and celebrate them. This is a portrait of me and my son called Stories of Our History. It was the beginning of my series called Stories of My Histories, where I created personal narratives of my family. In this sculpture, I'm passing down my stories to a little me. This also holds true in life, as I'm preserving these stories for my son and hoping to share the pride of where we came from. I'm going to bring you to the beginning of my work and show you how I came to develop artwork about my heritage. As an adult, I moved to Columbus, Ohio with my own family to attend graduate school at Ohio State University. This again was another culture shock. As I moved out of Miami, from this experience, I began making work about culture and heritage. I missed my culture, and I started to question ideas of the presence of heritage and culture. I used molds as a metaphor for heritage, an original where many can come from, but the original may no longer exist. This piece, titled Clusters, was a sort of beginning. Creating these clusters describes a lineage for me, using the same figure to represent my ancestors, and then changing the figure as the piece grows describes how a lineage moves. I came from these originals, but as time moves, things are lost, but some things are gained. In this piece lineage, the figures are whole on the bottom, but as you move up in the piece, there are lost parts, but as well as the addition of extra pieces. After constructing these large, time-demanding slip-casted sculptures, I wanted to loosen up. I wanted to still create symbolic work, but I also wanted to have fun. The body plays an essential role in my work, as it has memory to it, and memory extends itself to my ideas of the body. In my process of referencing the body, I have forgone the use of an actual and specific body. I can use the memory of my own body, the body of my family and ancestors, to extend my memories to places beyond the body. In creating more of an essence of the body and not a likeness, I am able to visit personal and painful narratives that I find hard to confront. This is a point where I started to really look at and reference pre-Colombian artwork. There's a beautiful simplicity that gives you just enough information for a figure to appear as a body. This is a Colombian quimbaya piece from 11th century. Texture was also important, as I was layering these drips that became excessive and a product of anxiety, a sort of self-portrait. So I wanted to simplify my forms and add humor that I felt exists in pre-Columbian work. I'm also interested in the collection and positioning of objects to reference hierarchy and the symbolism of those positions. Sorry, this was the texture piece that I was talking about before. I think that making work that makes me laugh after I'm finished is most important. I want to make meaningful work, but I think there should be room for humor. And always multiples, because I never felt quite okay as one. I was never good enough. One was never good enough. There always had to be more. The gold work of pre-Columbian Colombia is also a big source of influence, and Colombians had so much of a resource, they made a lot of work in gold. Unfortunately, the Spaniards stole and melted so much of it down that all that was left was from funerary objects. This is a Muisca piece from 100 BC. As I'm looking to preserve my family and our stories, I hope to also preserve some of our ancestral rituals. In this piece called Colombian Death Mass, I created gold luster masks similar to the ones found in Muisca tombs to honor my lost uncles and aunts. Being so far away from family, I miss out on significant life events. I want to be able to participate in small ways that are special to me. I also love how women and mothers are portrayed in pre-Columbian work. I have often used some of these references to portray my own experience as a mother. This piece is called Mamas, and it's about sometimes feeling like I feel short as a parent and drop the ball, or baby. And I promise I never drop my baby. This piece is called Mi Familia, and each one of the heads are created and named after close relatives. I think that one of my favorite parts about making these kinds of pieces is telling my family, look, I made you, and watching their faces. Despite the appearance of the head, everyone is made with love, I promise. My latest work, El Dorado, is about the myth and story of Colombian Muisca chief, Zipa, who used to adorn himself in gold and take gold offerings to the lake of Huatavita for the sun. I have missed out on a lot of Colombian history and have used my work to fill that gap. I want to reclaim this history and relive it somehow as I make work. I think El Dorado is one of the best places to start, as it's one of Colombia's oldest and most famous stories throughout time. I'm excited to reference the mountains, terracotta, and gold. The terracotta for what the Amerindians and Colombians used, the mountains for home and where the clay came from, and the gold for its symbolism. I hope to take these influences and intertwine them with my personal narratives. I want to give a special thank you to my family, my partner, Chris Stone, who is so supportive. I wouldn't be able to do all the things I've ever wanted to do at the same time, like being a mother, student, teacher, and artist. And my son, Arbalaez Stone, who is a constant inspiration, and some of the most influential moments come from drawing and watching cartoons with him. Thank you for listening to my stories. I take pride in sharing them. I'm so fortunate that I was born in a country where I can share my stories and celebrate them. A country where people risk their lives and sacrifice everything to be here so they can build. To learn more, please visit my site, nataliaarbalaez.com, and my Instagram, Natalia_Arbalaez_. Thank you so much.